In a small house on the outskirts of the city, we meet Heller, who seems to have a huge project in mind. He has many pieces and analyzes each one with detail and dedication. His wife, Sarah, interrupts him. She wants her goodbye kiss before leaving on a business trip. Before she leaves, Sarah wants to drink a coffee made by her husband. Heller doesn't want his wife to leave. 5 days is the longest they've been apart since they got married. They love each other deeply and enjoy a wonderful life. With his methodical character and attention to detail, there is no other place Heller can work than for the U.S. government in an intelligence facility. Bear, who is the office rock star, always comes to Heller to ask for favors. Heller is in the decryption and analysis area. Every day, he communicates with a person who calls themselves the tenant, who provides him with sensitive information. That morning, the tenant sent him a very compromising file and gave him instructions to open it only on his personal computer, avoiding the agency's computers. Although Heller is perhaps the most experienced analyst in the entire agency, he has his own vault, a place with incredible decryption capacity but completely isolated from everything else. Once he decrypts the files, he finds orders signed by the government to attack places and people around the world, disguising them as terrorist attacks. All the documents have the signature of a single person, the head of the agency, Moore. However, Heller remains calm. For now, he just asks for the rest of the day off and goes home. But later, he tries to call his wife, and she doesn't answer, which is strange considering they promised they always would. The next morning, Chief Moore is waiting for Heller in his office. It's the first time he's come down from the top floor, and everyone knows that doesn't mean good news. Moore takes Heller directly to the CA director, O'Brien, and Heller begins to get nervous. However, the news he receives is 1,000 times worse. The night before, there was an attack at the hotel where his wife was staying. Unfortunately, she is one of the fatal victims. Heller doesn't even have time to process the news. Carlos takes him home, and the street is full of reporters who want to get more information. To him, they are just vultures willing to feed on his pain. What was supposed to be a 5-day business trip now becomes an eternity without his beloved. However, Heller is not a man who sits around waiting for answers. The next morning, he is in Moore's office demanding to know everything they have. An idiot in a suit named Caleb, an analyst, says Heller should leave this work to the experts, but Heller reminds him that it was his wife who died and he cannot stand there doing nothing. Thanks to that comment, Heller gets a few days off. Moore wants to keep him away from the computers, but something suggests it's not just about that. Sarah's body arrives a few days later. Only 2 people died in the attack, and the circumstances seem very suspicious to Heller. In his wife's belongings, Heller finds a gift, a kind of puzzle that Sarah planned to give him when she returned. After shedding all possible tears, Heller returns to the office and gets to work. Something tells him that in the files the tenant provided him, he might find a clue or signal about what happened. In just a couple of hours, Heller performs a complete analysis of the attack. It was not an attack, but a robbery that went wrong when the teams betrayed each other. The only reason Sarah was caught was because she tried to save the other people using voice recognition. Heller gets the identities of the culprits, a unit made up of Russians and South Americans. However, the last of the subjects, who was the one who shot and executed his wife in the middle of the street, did not let himself be identified. However, nothing motivates him as much as solving the death of his wife. Heller built an exact 3D replica of the street using the perspectives of all the cameras and managed to get enough information from the subject's face. His name is Horde Schiller, a mercenary wanted in a dozen countries, and he has a relative who is currently in London, specifically at a coffee shop she visits every morning. In a single night, Heller has accomplished what Caleb didn't do in a week. Gretchen, Hortz's relative, is his most important lead for now, and if they want to catch her, they must act fast. However, instead of that, Heller is sent to therapy. Once he is allowed to return to work, he prints all the documents the tenant sent him and goes directly up to Moore's office to confront him. Heller has enough evidence to imprison Moore and Caleb for the rest of their lives. The deal is simple. Heller wants to kill his wife's killers, or they will all go down with him. After making his forceful speech, Heller can barely hold his stomach, but he is now committed and cannot back down. The next morning, Heller gets what he wanted. Moore has approved intensive training, led by Morpheus himself, only here he prefers to be called Henderson. While Heller learns to kill, Caleb has gotten to work and has a complete team reviewing every step Heller took inside the office. They need to know where he hid the backups and destroy them, but they still can't find anything. Moore loses patience and orders Henderson to get rid of Heller, but when he arrives at his room, Heller is already gone. The next morning, Heller is in London and visits the exact place where his wife died. Without wasting time, he rents a room near the coffee shop that Gretchen visits every day. He is sure that she is the link to Hortz. As soon as she leaves her apartment, Heller goes up to her door and looks for a YouTube tutorial on how to pick locks. Once inside the apartment, he looks for clues or something that will lead him to Hortz. In a drawer, he finds a gun. He takes it but receives a signal that Gretchen is returning and prepares to ambush her. However, when the time comes to pull the trigger, he doesn't have the courage to do it, so he escapes. In the photos he took inside the apartment, he finds the name of a clinic, and upon entering its website, he manages to see one of the men from Hortz's group. With a simple script, he manages to turn off all the computers in the clinic. Then he enters disguised and manages to trap Gretchen in front of a camera. Gretchen, who is allergic to pollen, sees a large amount enter through the vents. If she doesn't answer the questions quickly, she will die in a few minutes. Once Gretchen begins to suffocate, Heller, being a weak noodle, has no chance in the fight, and Gretchen escapes from the clinic, managing to get to the street. Heller steals her phone and escapes, but now his face is on the phones of everyone who witnessed the accident. After deciphering all the information from Gretchen's phone, Heller manages to get to Marseille, but runs into Henderson, who doesn't have a friendly expression. Henderson has orders to kill him and plans to carry them out, but Heller also learns some things, including how to create explosives that generate chaos. The explosion is big enough for Henderson to lose his trail, so for now, Heller is safe. With the help of the tenant, he arrives in Turkey. He is supposed to find a contact here who will give him something important. He finally meets the tenant, who turns out to be a woman with an exceptional talent for deciphering files, just like him. Together they could have a chance to get justice for Sarah, but first they must pretend to be clients who want to hire Hortz's team for a job. Back in the United States, O'Brien talks with Moore about Heller's case. He tells her that he is not stable and gave him open-ended leave. O'Brien threatens Moore. Everyone knows he enjoys shady operations, and she wants to leave that behind. If he doesn't get on the transparency train with her, he will end up in prison. As soon as she leaves the restaurant, her assistant shows her photos of Henderson chasing Heller and tells her that he received orders from Moore, so she decides to act and send someone she trusts. Heller returns to Spain, ready to pose as a client looking for a top team. There he locates Mishka, who seems to be the weakest link and may reveal something to them. Even when his partner warns him that Henderson has arrived at the hotel, Heller decides to stick with the plan and approaches Mishka while he is swimming in the pool. With little time, Heller only asks him one question: "Where is Hortz or you die?" As expected, Mishka tells him to go to hell, a serious mistake he will soon regret. Kate, the tenant's real name, accesses the service area cameras and guides Heller to the basement, but there are several people behind him, including Henderson. When Henderson catches Heller, another subject appears to defend him. It's the man O'Brien sent, and now they're in the middle of a death struggle. Heller watches as Henderson kills this subject, but gets hurt. Feeling compassion for him, he tries to help him, but Kate orders him to flee because more men are approaching. Although they manage to escape the hotel, that night Caleb's team manages to track them to their hideout and sends units to eliminate them. Kate has a kind of secret passage, and they manage to get away by going through the houses from below and through the alleys. By the time the unit reaches the house, Kate's traces have already been erased. However, a boat spots them and opens fire on them. Due to the blood on the windshield, Kate has been injured and Heller takes the wheel. After driving as fast as he could, Heller manages to evade the agents, but Kate does not survive her injuries, and he is forced to abandon her in the car and flee on foot. After witnessing the death of his wife and a friend of many years, Heller goes into predator mode and manages to track down another member of the team. With some fake missiles, he manages to lure him into a trap. If the subject lets go of the lid, he will explode into 1,000 pieces unless he reveals Hortz's location. Although the subject tells him everything, he is one of the culprits, and Heller never intended to let him live. Hortz is a very cautious man. His base is on a small fishing island, accessible only by boats, and he controls almost all the routes. Heller, using the deceased's phone, identifies his associates who are transporting a cargo directly to Hortz. Now he just has to act stealthily and maybe he can find him. The only problem is that he has just run into Bear, who is doing an undercover job and knows what Heller has been doing lately. Bear tells him to end this and go home, but Heller can no longer do that. That house no longer belongs to him. Sarah is no longer there. Bear lets him go after all. He can simulate dementia. But just as he leaves, someone attacks him from behind. When he wakes up, he has been taken to a boat in the middle of the ocean where Hortz is waiting for him. There he learns that Hortz has always worked for Moore. They have been partners for years, and he does the dirty work for the agency. Hortz tells him all this because he is convinced that Heller will not leave that boat alive, and he is confident in his victory. Looking at him, Hortz knows that Heller is not a killer. He even offers him a loaded gun to kill him, but Heller seems to freeze at the opportunity. In the end, he settles for an instant when he sees the fear in Hortz's eyes and lowers the gun. But at that moment, the ship begins to fail and they lose control. When Hortz demands an explanation, Heller simply tells him that they have already hacked the ship and that they are no longer in international waters, but in an ambush planned by him. Interpol boards the ship, arresting Hortz and all his henchmen. Back in the United States, O'Brien receives the files that prove the corruption of Moore and all his associates, including Caleb, who seemed very sure of himself until prison became his new reality. As for Heller, Henderson comes to thank him for sending help to the laundry. He saved his life and can now teach him some new tricks if he wishes. The film ends with Heller finishing the project he had started at the beginning of the story. It was a small plane that he built from scratch, a gift from his wife who always believed in his potential.